I've always been the kind of person who second-guesses everything, overthinks texts, replays conversations, lies awake wondering if I said the wrong thing. So when I tell you that I almost talked myself out of trusting my instincts the night things went wrong, I want you to understand that is not a character flaw. That is what this person was counting on. I met Daniel on Hinge in early October. His profile was detailed in a way most aren't, full sentences in the prompts. A photo from what looked like a hiking trip in Patagonia. Another one at a wedding where he was clearly the best man. Civil engineer, 31 years old. He had the kind of profile that makes you wonder why someone like this is still using an app, but you don't wonder too hard because you're happy he is. We matched on a Thursday. By Sunday, we were talking for 3 or 4 hours a night, the kind of conversations that wander from childhood memories to what we'd want our lives to look like in 10 years. He remembered small things I mentioned, my sister's name, that I was anxious about a presentation at work, that I only drink oat milk. He was attentive in a way that felt like effort, not performance. After about 2 weeks, he suggested we meet. Coffee on a Saturday morning, somewhere near my neighborhood. He found a place I'd actually been before, said he'd been once and liked it. The familiarity of the suggestion felt safe. The date was set for the 3rd Saturday of October. The morning of, he texted around 8 to confirm. We were supposed to meet at 10. The coffee shop opened at 9. I got there a few minutes early and ordered, found a seat near the window where I could see the door. At 10 past 10, I texted him that I was inside near the front. He replied immediately, running about 5 minutes behind. So sorry. Fine. Normal. 15 minutes later, no one who looked like his photos had walked in. I texted again. This time it took him almost 4 minutes to respond. I'm right outside. My friend is having a situation and I need 1 minute. Something about the wording snagged on something in my brain, but I couldn't name it. His friend is having a situation is not how people talk, but I told myself I was overthinking. A woman came in, late 30s, overdressed for a Saturday morning coffee, scanning the room with an efficiency that seemed purposeful. She walked directly to my table and sat down across from me without asking. "You're meeting Daniel," she said. It was not a question. I said yes. I asked if she knew him. She said she was his cousin. She said Daniel had gotten to a minor car accident on the way over. Nothing serious, but he was shaken and didn't want to drive the last few blocks. He'd asked her to walk me over to where he was parked. The story was complete and rehearsed and completely wrong. I knew it the way you know a photo is edited, even when you can't identify the specific thing that's off. The woman across from me was calm and smiling, and her hands were folded on the table, and I wanted so badly for the story to be true. I asked for the address. She said it was easier to walk, just a couple of minutes. I said I'd rather drive over myself if she gave me the street. Her smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes shifted. She said Daniel had been really looking forward to meeting me, and it would mean a lot if I just came to check on him. I took out my phone and called the number I had for Daniel. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I called again. Same. I told her I was going to wait here until he could call me back. I said it evenly and picked up my coffee cup like I intended to finish it. She sat there for another 30 seconds, I counted, and then she said, "Okay, I'll let him know." She left. I watched through the window as she walked to a black SUV idling at the corner, and got in the passenger side. I could not see the driver. I didn't move for about 10 minutes. Then I paid, went to my car, locked the doors, and drove home on surface streets, watching my mirrors. Daniel texted me that afternoon. "Hey, so sorry about this morning, wild day. Want to reschedule for next weekend?" No mention of an accident. No mention of a cousin. I wrote back, "Did you send someone to meet me at the coffee shop?" 3 hours of silence. Then, what? No. Why? I didn't respond. I unmatched him. I reported the profile. I searched the photos the way you do when something feels wrong. Reverse image search, looking at metadata, and found nothing. The photos came back clean. Either they were legitimately his, or they had been stolen from a private account with no searchable trail. That night around midnight, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 11 seconds of silence, followed by what sounded like someone setting a phone face down on a hard surface. I got the same call 4 nights in a row, always after midnight. Always the same 11 seconds. Always the same sound at the end. Then they stopped. I told my sister what happened. She asked me if I'd thought about how that woman knew where I was sitting in the coffee shop before she walked in. She knew my face. She walked directly to me without scanning the room the way you do when you're looking for someone you've never met. She already knew exactly who I was and exactly where I was. I had not thought about that. I thought about it for the rest of the year. I don't know who Daniel was. I don't know who the woman was. I don't know who was in the passenger seat of that SUV. But I know that at least 2 people put time and planning into getting me to walk away from a public place with a stranger. And I know that when I didn't, someone called my personal number 4 nights in a row to make sure I understood that they had it. The profile is gone now, reported and removed. But gone doesn't mean over. Gone just means I stopped being able to see it. I want to be clear about something before I tell you this. I am not naive. I'm 34 years old. I have a graduate degree. I teach high school English and spend half my professional life teaching teenagers to read critically and question sources. I know how predatory behavior works. I know the playbook. I tell you this because I want you to understand how good this person was at what they did and how close I came to not seeing it. His name on the app was Marcus. He was a photographer, portrait work, he said, some commercial. He had a public Instagram linked to his profile, which is the thing that made me trust him immediately, because people who are lying about who they are don't usually provide a verifiable social media presence with 4 years of posts. The account had 2,200 followers, consistent content going back to 2020, photos of real-looking clients, geographic tags in my city and surrounding areas. He looked like someone with a life. We matched on a Tuesday. He messaged first, and his opener referenced something specific from my profile, a quote from Joan Didion I'd used in my About Me section. He knew the essay it came from. We talked about it for an hour. I was already engaged in a way I hadn't been in months. Over the next week and a half, we texted constantly. He had a good eye for when I was stressed. My replies would get shorter and he'd pick up on it, ask if I was okay, not in an intrusive way, in a way that felt like genuine reading of tone. He sent photos, sometimes nothing inappropriate, just things he was working on, a portrait of an elderly woman, at a farmer's market, a long exposure shot of the city at night. He was talented, or whoever's work he was using was talented. He suggested we meet on a Friday evening, somewhere in the Arts District, a wine bar I'd heard of but never been to. He said he'd make a reservation. He texted me the name of the reservation so I could confirm it myself. I checked the restaurant's website, found the reservation listed for 7 p.m. under Marcus, 2 guests. This was the specific detail that neutralized almost all of my remaining caution. He had made an actual reservation. I got there at 6:55. The host confirmed the reservation and showed me to a small table near the back. I ordered sparkling water and waited. At 7:15, I texted Marcus. He responded in under a minute, "Parking nightmare. 10 more minutes max, I'm so sorry." His typing had the apologetic energy of someone who was actually embarrassed. I believed it. At 7:30, a man I had never seen before sat down across from me. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired, well-dressed, completely composed. He said, "Marcus asked me to let you know he's going to be a few more minutes. I'm his uncle. I was dining next door and said I'd come check on you. He didn't want you to feel stood up. I have thought about this moment many times. The uncle strategy, like the brother and cousin strategies I have since learned about from other accounts, is designed to use social embarrassment as a compliance mechanism. If I refuse the uncle, I might be refusing someone's harmless elderly relative. My discomfort at possibly being rude was supposed to override my read on the situation. I asked the uncle for Marcus's phone number. He said he didn't have it memorized. I asked him to call Marcus from his own phone so I could talk to him. He said Marcus was probably driving and couldn't pick up. For every specific, reasonable request I made, there was an answer that was just plausible enough to prevent certainty. I stood up and said I was going to step outside to make a call. I left through the front door and did not go back in. I called Marcus's number from the sidewalk. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I texted, "There's a man claiming to be your uncle at the table. Who is he?" I walked to my car and sat inside with the doors locked and the engine running. 90 seconds later, Marcus texted back, "What? I don't have an uncle in the city. Is this a joke?" Then, immediately after, "Are you still there? Please tell me you're not still inside." The fear in the message felt real, which meant either Marcus was also a victim of whatever this was, or the fear was the next layer of the performance. I drove away. I sat in a parking garage 2 blocks over for 20 minutes, watching the street outside through the windshield. Marcus called twice. I didn't answer. When I got home, I went through his Instagram with fresh eyes. The geotags were consistent with the city, but never specific. General neighborhoods, nothing pinpointed. The clients in his portraits were never tagged. The engagement on his posts was light for the follower count. A few test comments I typed into the search bar turned up nothing on their own accounts. The account was constructed. Not quickly, 4 years of it. Someone had built a persona with the patience and methodical attention to detail of a professional. The Didion reference, the emotional attunement in our conversations, the preemptive reservation so I could verify it, all of it was engineering. The reservation was real. I confirmed that later. A reservation under Marcus had existed. Someone had called the restaurant and made it, which meant someone knew which restaurant, knew the name to use, and made a real booking at a real restaurant. not as an afterthought, but as a deliberate layer of credibility. Marcus's profile was gone within 24 hours of me reporting it. The Instagram account went private that same night and then disappeared a day later. For 3 weeks afterward, I had the feeling of being watched that I cannot fully explain to someone who has never experienced it. Not paranoia in a clinical sense, just a consistent background level awareness that I had been the subject of a significant amount of attention from someone whose face I never saw. That they had done this before, that they were doing it again. I still think about the man in the restaurant, the uncle, and what his function was in all of this. He was calm and prepared and unhurried. He was not nervous. Whatever he had expected to happen at that table, being asked for a phone number was not a surprise. He had an answer ready. That level of preparation belongs to something organized. I teach my students, when a text is too perfectly constructed, question the author's intent. I missed it in myself. I didn't miss it in time to matter, but I came close. I was 26, living alone for the first time in a studio apartment in a mid-sized city where I knew approximately no one. I had moved for a job night shifts at a hospital, which meant my social life existed in a narrow band of late mornings and early afternoons when everyone else was at work. I downloaded Tinder not because I thought it would lead anywhere, but because I needed to talk to people, and an app was what was available at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, when you've just finished your 4th consecutive overnight shift and the silence in your apartment is beginning to feel structural. His name was Tyler. He was 30. He worked in IT support, he said, for a university across town. He had warm eyes in his photos and an easy, unhurried way of messaging that matched the rhythm of someone who wasn't performing interest. We talked for almost 3 weeks before I felt comfortable enough to suggest meeting. Night shifts make normal social logistics complicated. I explained that my schedule was strange, and he was immediately accommodating about it. He said he was a night owl anyway. He suggested a diner near the hospital, open 24 hours for a late dinner after one of my shifts. I want to tell you that I noticed something in those early weeks that I should have followed up on. He never video called. When I suggested it twice, the first time his internet was having problems and the call dropped before I could see him clearly. The second time, he answered with the camera covered, said he'd accidentally updated something and his drivers were broken, and spent 10 minutes with me on audio only. The conversation easy and warm enough that I let it go. Both times I meant to push harder, and both times the conversation moved on and the window closed. He also never wanted to talk about where he grew up. Not in an evasive, suspicious way. He'd engage with the topic briefly, and then redirect with a question about me. I noticed it the way you notice a small skip in a song and then forget about it because the melody is still pleasant. The night we were supposed to meet, I came off shift at 11. I texted him from the hospital parking garage as I was walking to my car. He texted back immediately, said he was already near the diner. When I pulled in, the diner's lot was well lit, and there were a handful of cars. A late-night diner near a hospital is almost never empty. I parked, checked my phone, and saw a new message. Actually, I walked over from my car and realized I need to grab something from it. I parked a block over on the side street. Can you pull around? The message read naturally. I read it 3 times, and it still read naturally. I sat in my car for a moment, I was tired. I had worked 11 hours. My guard was below baseline. I almost pulled around. What stopped me was not logic. It was the memory of a conversation I'd had with a patient the week before, a woman in her 40s who told me, matter-of-factly between vitals checks, that the reason she always trusted her gut was that her gut was faster than her brain, and one time that had mattered. She said it like it was unremarkable. I thought about it at an unremarkable moment, which is maybe the way these things work. I did not pull around. I texted back, "I'm parked in the main lot. Come find me here and we'll walk in together." I watched the message for 3 minutes. No response. I called the number. It rang once and disconnected. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I started my car and drove to the well-lit exit of the lot. As I turned onto the main street, I passed the side street he had mentioned. There was a van parked at the curb, a dark blue utility van with the engine running. I could see the exhaust. I drove past without slowing down and did not look at it for longer than a second, and that was deliberate. I drove until I was on a highway ramp, and then I drove until I was 20 miles away, and then I pulled into a gas station and sat there with the engine running and my hands on the wheel. Tyler never texted again. I deleted the app that night. I did not sleep for the next 2 days the way I usually can't sleep when something has happened that my brain has not finished processing. I went back over the 3 weeks of conversation and looked for the shape of what had been there, the too easy accommodation of my schedule, the interest in which hospital I worked at, phrased as care but functioning as location data, the late-night diner near the hospital, the message asking me to pull around to a side street while I was alone at midnight. I found his profile on Tinder again 2 weeks later. Same photos, different first name. I reported it. Then I found it again the week after that. Same photos, different name again. Someone was cycling the profile. I told my supervisor what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she told me that 2 months before I started the job, a nurse from a different floor had met someone from a dating app near the hospital after a late shift. She had gone somewhere she shouldn't have. She came home. She was physically okay, but she didn't come back to work. My supervisor said she couldn't tell me more than that. I think about Tyler's photos sometimes, the warm eyes, the easy demeanor, how many times those photos had probably been used, and how many different names they'd worn. And I think about the van idling on the side street with the exhaust rising in the cold, how long it had been sitting there, and whether if I had pulled around, it would have had time to feel like a mistake before it stopped mattering. I transferred to a different shift not long after. Daylight hours. More people around. I still don't meet people from apps. I'm not sure I ever will again. Not because I'm afraid of strangers. I've always been careful about that. But because I know now that careful isn't a fixed position. It has to be actively maintained. And some nights after a long shift in a parking garage, alone at midnight with your phone in your hand, careful is very hard to hold on to.